Hello, my name is Bill Keach. I work for Sunbelt Computer Software, and today I'd just like to talk about the function or L function statement. A function or L function statement is a way of creating modern subroutines inside your PLB programs. It begins with the label for the function or the L function. It then can have parameters being passed in. Then you end up having the entry statement, which separates the parameters from the local data. It then can have local data specified. Once the local data is specified, then you can put your execution statements, and it needs to be terminated at the end by a function end. Functions can also return a value, either using the return statement and using a clause, or at the function end using the using clause. Functions are both recursive. They allow you to have local data, and at the same time, any labels used inside a function, both execution and data labels, are private to that function only. The difference between an L function and a function is that the L function is local to the program and can only be accessed by the program, where a function statement will actually put an entry into the PLC that will allow outside programs to reference the function inside that module. A function is invoked by using a call statement that will have its label and can use both the giving for return value and the using to give both, in this case, both the parameters. A function can also only be entered by actually calling its label, so it cannot ever be accidentally entered. You can also not go to a label inside a function or call a label inside a function. So now let's look at this program in the debugger. So we'll just start the debugger up, and we'll start stepping through the program where we call main, and it enters the function. In this case, there's no parameters, no local variables, so we'll step through till we return inside the function. Now we'll come down here to this function, which will eventually be called by the lookup word function. The decode result function gets called by the lookup word function. The lookup word function actually gets invoked by a press of a button. So in this case, we'll come down here. We will set a breakpoint, and then we'll continue with the execution of the program. In this case, we're using a REST service to reference an online dictionary to look up the word hello. So when we press look up word, we end up breaking here. Inside the debugger, we can see that we have a call stack. We can see at what level we are in the call stack. Up here we see we're also at call level 3. We can go and click on the local buttons, and this will actually display both the parameter data for us, and as well it will display all the local data. There, if we right click, we could actually do a quick watch on some of the data if we wish. Close that, do a quick watch on the JSON data here, and we have all the basic information that we have. If we go back up further on the call stack to a previous function, you will see that when we look at the locals now, that they're locals for this function. So as we traverse the stack back and forth, we see all the various locals inside the function. Now we'll come and continue with the program. We'll do a stop, exit the debugger, and we're back to our regular program that we're at. Another feature of functions is the fact that you can use exceptions inside them. Exceptions are a replacement for trap, where a trap ends up trapping errors on a global basis. Exceptions can be set up and they exist only inside the function. So in this case, I'm setting two exceptions, a format or an object error, and they would come in and be set up when this function is executed, and when the function ends, then these will be cleared. What happens is if a format or an object error happened, then we would jump down to the parameter, which would give an alert and then do a function end in this case. So unlike trap, where you would have to do a trap clear, exceptions are automatically cleared at the end of a function. If a format error, as an example, happened inside a function, then what would happen is the function would first see whether it had an exception set. If not, it would travel up the stack looking at every other function higher up in the stack to see if there's an exception. And if none of those were found, then it would actually look for the trap. Now, the exception statements allow you to check to see if an exception is set, clear an exception, disable or enable an exception, set an exception, and as well something called exception do that allows you to force an exception. As an example, in this program, we could come in and I could actually force an exception right after this. That would be a format, for example, for testing to make sure that my parameter error was coming out properly. Another advantage of functions, as we'll see in this small function example, is the fact that parameters can actually start with an initial value. So in this case, we've decided that the example 1 L function will have two parameters, a dim and a form. The dim starts off with the default value of Sam, and the form starts off with the default value of 5. So if we end up calling example 1 and pass it two parameters, then those two parameters would be replaced. But right afterwards, if we call with no parameters, then we'll get the default, as shown when we run it. So we'll run it under the debugger. We will step in to our function, call the first one, and that when we look at our parameters inside the locals, we see that the values are 10 and 100, which is exactly what we passed for our program. We'll continue on here. Wait for a key in. And this time, when we step in, being there's no parameters, we see that Sam and 5 are now set up as parameters. Hit return. Now displays Sam and 5 and return. In this way, you can also set up functions with variable lengths of parameters and pre-default setup. Well, hopefully through this quick talk on L functions with parameters and local data will hopefully spur you on to start updating perhaps some of your programs to start using some of these new features. Now, some people will probably say, how long have these features been around? And they've actually been in the language since version 9. So we're talking about 15 years now. So they have been actually well used and tested. And we use them extensively within our own software pieces, such as the debugger, the IDE, and other products that we write in PLP ourselves. So here's Bill Keats signing off. Till my next video, have a good day. Thank you.